I'm going to start actually by one, introducing myself. My name is Johnny Perez. I work as Director of U.S. Prison Programs for the National Religious Campaign Against Torture, where I work with people who've been directly impacted by the criminal legal system and faith leaders around the country. Originally, this conversation was around violence in prison. And due to the recent events around the killing of George Floyd, NRCAT decided to actually shift the conversation slightly to one of race and justice. So our panelists today are equally adept to still speak to the issue, also specifically being impacted by racism and impacted by the criminal legal system. The connection here is that, when we think about the way, in the different ways that Black people are treated in this country and people of color are treated in this country, and the manifestations that we see of that, specifically in police brutality and different ways of state-sponsored torture and violence against Black and brown people, what we're really looking at is racism and the way, and systemic racism, and the way in which it manifests itself differently in different ways in different segments of our community and our society. It shows itself in healthcare, it shows itself in education, it shows itself in housing, and it definitely shows itself in within the criminal within the criminal legal system, but also in this whole idea of mass incarceration and how we lead the world in not only incarcerating people, but most of these folks are Black and brown people. And I won't get into the stats a whole lot, but what I want to do is create space for my panelists to actually introduce themselves. And it's really great. We have Reverend Donna Hylton. Thank you so much for joining us. Executive Director and founder of A Little Piece of Light. Adnan Khan, Executive Director at Restore Justice. Thank you so much for coming. I'm so used to being on panels. I'm like, oh, welcome. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much for, allowing me to have you in a sense, Marcus Lilly, who's actually working to do a lot of working with folks who are coming home directly from incarceration, and also really honored to have you as one of our new advisors at the NRCAT Advisory Council, which is newly built, and actually will be formally launching this month. And of course, Richard Smith, who works as the National Director for United and Healing Equity over at Common Justice. And I don't usually out people, but I want to look at it as a strength in the sense that one thing that really kind of like unites us all, besides the fact that we're all working on issues of mass incarceration, is that we've all been impacted by the same system that now we're looking to dismantle. So I just want to take a moment and just go around kind of like self-select, and have folks, one, react to the current moment and to introduce yourself formally, and then we can get into more of the conversation. Donna, you want to lead us, if you can?
Been doing a lot of different kind of leading lately. It's fine. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Forgive me. It's not really a disclaimer, but it's just a recognition that this moment, I'm going through a lot of emotions as a Black woman, a Black mother, not just in this time, in all times, but right now what's specifically poignant is to recognize and to understand the many ways in which this country has kept its knee in our necks and on our backs continuously through systemic racism, systemic biases, but also through so many other ways, right? In this moment, I just want to honor all those who we have lost to these issues, these wrongs, these morally and ethically wrong things, and just say I'm also deeply honored and appreciative to be in this moment, this movement with each and every one of you. So I just want to thank you for this. And just a little piece about myself. My name is Donna Hylton. I served 27 years in New York State's maximum security prison for women as an adolescent. I started my advocacy and my activism inside prison, and now I'm out here doing it. And even now more than ever, I am honored and I am glad to be in this moment, because this is a movement and we will continue. And I'm glad to continue with all of you.
Thank you. Next, Richard.
Hi, everyone. It's kind of hard to, to have this conversation at this moment, right? I look at my sister Donna over there, all in a state of grief. We're grieving loss, and we've been grieving as a people for decades, centuries, behind the constant attack and the attempted genocide of our people. And so it's just, it hurts my heart to see you, sister, like that, you know? But I understand where you're at, and we need to be there. I think this is a really pivotal time in our country's history, because we are at a place where we can no longer hide behind our unique identities and recognize the fact that all of us are being oppressed. All of us are subjected to the same types of terrorizing attacks, whether we are LGBTQIA, trans folks, women of color, men of color, you know, folks who are from other countries in this country. Like, we are being all under attack. And so, you know, I just want to take a moment to think about and just be there in spirit with all the people who are out in the community right now in the streets raising hell. Mm-hmm. Right? And just you know, give them the spirit of courage, the spirit of power, the spirit of faith and confidence to keep fighting that fight. The work I do is around healing and helping people understand the intersection between the impact of trauma, whether it's historical trauma, whether it's interpersonal trauma on the lives of people of color, and that relationship between trauma and those of us who are formerly incarcerated and impacted by the prison system and the criminal legal system. And now more than ever, you know, echoing the sentiment of Donna, is that we really need to be committed to not just healing, but healing justice. And I'm looking forward to talking more about that right now. But thank you, Johnny, for having me become a part of this conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you for joining. Before we go to the next person, like Donna, it's also not lost on me that you still decided to join this conversation, this webinar, because of the person that you are, you keep your commitments, and like you're so dedicated. So I also want to create space to say, hey, like, if you feel like this is too much, you can completely sign off. Like anybody has a problem with it, I'll be front and center, you know, and like it's not an issue.
I'm not leaving my people, Johnny. I'm not leaving my people. I took time out. I've been on the streets. I've been on the front lines, but this is also important. This is the work. I'm not leaving my people. No.
Thank you. Adnan or Marcus, anyone? You gotta unmute yourself, Marcus, I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Still can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you well. Yep.
Okay. I mean, first of all, thank you, Johnny. As always, a pleasure, and thank every one of the panelists for coming and sharing their time. And
I'm sorry, Marcus. Speak up a little bit and into the microphone so we can hear you. Thank you, man.
Can you hear me now?
That's better.
Okay. I want to thank all the panelists for coming and sharing their time. Mm-hmm. And you know, just being here at this moment in time, I feel like this discussion is needed. It's kind of hard for me to speak to the current moment. I'm very frustrated, very tired. But I will say, I'll keep this short and concise. I feel like the fact that this is the first time in history that all 50 states protested, I feel like even within this madness, you know, that's a light that we can, or maybe not a light, it's a stepping stone that we can build off of. If we can capitalize off this moment and begin to organize and mobilize our communities, I feel like we would begin to make a more significant difference in the way society view African-American males as well as African-American women. So I'm Marcus Lilly. As Johnny stated earlier, I'm new to the advisory board, NRCAT advisory board, and I hope to, you know, be of as much assistance as I can. I'm currently a PRP worker. I work directly with clients that have mental health issues. Also do mentoring. I'm a University of Baltimore college student. I do a lot of advocacy for prison reform, and I'm a self-proclaimed transformation advocate. I say that because, and I just label myself that, but I say that because I did, in 2004, I was sentenced to 25 years. I was a gang member for at least 8 to 10 of those years. And I just began to educate myself. And once I began to educate myself, I left all those things behind. I got enrolled in college while inside of prison when the Pell Grants came back as a pilot program. I was one of the first students to enter that pilot program. And as of today, I was the first student to come home from the Second Chance University of Baltimore college program and continue going to college. So that's my story.
Thanks. Thanks. Welcome home.
Thank you.
Yeah. Adnan?
Thank you, Johnny, and thank you for everyone here that's participating, and for everyone that's spending their time to view this panel and incorporate or come into these questions as well. So I appreciate everybody here. It means a lot. Organizing and mobilizing means a lot. Allyship for me means a lot, and knowing how to follow and where I can support best means a lot too for me. So for me personally, by the time I was 17, I was a parentless, homeless, high school dropout, full of trauma. By the time I was 18, as a young homeless teenager, I committed a crime, and I was subsequently sentenced to 25 years to life in a California maximum security prison. I spent a total of 16 years incarcerated, and during about my 14th year, I had co-founded this organization that today I serve as executive director of while incarcerated, and we changed a law called Senate Bill 1437, which was a felony murder rule in California, and I ended up being the first one resentenced under the bill we created from an organization that was created within a prison, which had to do a lot with collaboration, which had a lot to do with organizing in the prison, organizing and mobilizing outside of the prison, with our community, understanding how white privilege or how privilege works in that space and how it can be used. So there's a lot of organizing tools that were brought to light in my freedom. And so I want to, again, thank you for having me, Johnny. As always, you constantly think about me, man, and you always incorporate me in these events. So I'm here to just share whatever I can, but more importantly, I'm here to follow, and I'm here to be an ally, and however y'all need me.
Thank you. Thank you for all of you, to all of you. One of the things I try to kind of like do different, I guess, in the conversations that I have is really not send a whole lot of like context and preparation beforehand. So it's like, hey, get your talking points ready and things like that, and really have folks just like react in a moment, and like, because you're all doing the work, right? And you don't have to remember what you know, because and you know it because you've been doing it and been impacted by it. The very first question immediately that I have is just getting your thinking, like, on a micro level, people of color have been killed at the hands of police for years, right? And we protested, we've done a ton of things. Like, what makes this moment different, from your perspective? And then I'll add that I've been to 3 protests in 2 different states, New York and New Jersey. And I saw that the energy was very different, and I have my own thinking, but really trying to get from you, like, when you, through your networks and in your experience and what you're seeing, like, what makes this particular moment different than all the other moments that have happened prior to this? Were you saying something, Marcus? I couldn't. Think you're muted. You're on mute.
That's a good question.
Mm-hmm. Like, what really makes it different, and the reason I say that is because, I've been on a ton of calls where there's talk about, of giving people voters' rights and making sure that we vote these folks out who are not representing our constituency, if you will, and then, so like on one hand you have this upheaval, and then we always protest and nothing happens, right? And then there's now this conversation about, hey, can we keep the same energy into November and put in our leaders who are representative of our values and our goals and our needs? What are your thoughts on that?
So I'll start off by saying, one of the things that, our people are just fed up.
Mhm.
We're fed up. We're beyond the point of just marching and protesting. One of the things I was talking to a friend of mine about the other day is like, nonviolent protest has been a default response of
Mhm.
Black folks as brown folks, right? Trying to keep the peace. And I really think that's a true testament to the spirit of who we are. Like, despite the constant attacks on us, we still have tried to consistently approach this from a non-violent perspective,
Mhm.
hoping that we can touch on the heartstrings of the people who would witness us being brutalized and murdered in the streets, and that they would become galvanized and mobilized and want to act on our behalf. And I think we're at a point where we're no longer accepting nonviolence as a default. I don't think those officers would have been arrested and charged if shit had not been burned.
Mhm.
People would not catch it, would not tearing up some stuff,
Mhm.
right? If it was so peaceful, and I say that intentionally because I think even within this happening now, there's a polarization, right? We got to do this from this, like this is the way it should look, right? But how could you clarify, how could you define how pain looks, how a response to trauma should look? We all respond to trauma differently. I can't tell you that your way of responding to trauma and the pain of hundreds of years of oppression, systematic and interpersonal, right, is wrong. You're responding according to the way that your body has been experiencing this trauma. As a collective, we are responding that way. And I think we need to get out of the way and stop judging people for responding the way that they're responding, because we've had enough.
Martin Luther King, I believe, said rights are the language of the unheard, and how like this external representation. I've seen things on my social media that say, well, America has been looting Black people for years, I saw something on Reverend Donna Hylton's Facebook page, which I follow, where she talked about, the knee to the neck is symbolic to how America has had the knee to the neck of people of color, throughout the years. Donna, you want to expound on what motivated you to actually post that? And like,
Okay, so I live close to a train, so above train, so I apologize. So yeah, so one of the things that I want to get our people, and I'm not about violence, right? I'm not about violence, never have been, and never will be. But do I understand why it happens? Absolutely, because if we don't understand, and this is like the whole thing, if we don't understand the cause of something, we were never going to get to the solution of anything. All right. And so the violence that we're seeing is just a response to the violence that we've been seeing and feeling, no matter. And I don't come from this country. I don't come from this country. My country came together and I mean, we revolted. We revolted against those who enslaved us and captured and kept us captive. Right? It took so many different countries across this world to come for the people, the natives, and the indigenous of those lands to come together to fight. And a lot of countries were not able to do that. What we're seeing here in America is a culmination of 400 years. 400 years of violence. White people came to this land. They brought the Bible. And they massacred everything in their way. Everything in their way. We continue to see this being played out. And so I don't like the violence, but I understand it. And the young people, all people, I'm watching open, I'm out there saying enough, tired. Trauma is reverberating throughout. It's coming out. It's just emitting. It's just coming out in ways that we could never even understand. And so when we talk about being in our necks, it's just a literal, as well as a figurative and a physical thing that's been happening. And so the violence that we see is a response to the violence that people are tired of. And unfortunately, it appears that the only way they get it is if they see violence. These people don't understand anything else, it seems. They killed one of our most passive aggressive leaders, Martin Luther King. He did not believe in violence, but he understood why it happens. And they killed him. They killed Malcolm for saying this, for rising up. Every time they're afraid of what we are able to do, they resort to violence. Fear results in violence. Right now, our people are more than afraid. They're more than afraid. And so we will see violence as much as we don't want to admit it, and as much as we don't want to see it, we have to understand why it's happening. And that's how we get to restorative healing. That's how we can get to some restorative practices, to understand the root causes of this. It is violent. Poverty is violent. Poverty is violent. We're seeing so many millions of people who are food insecure right now. Food insecure. Children who can't go to school because of the pandemic, but can't eat at home because they never could eat at home. And now it's even worse. We see people, women, men too, but majority women, who because they're not going into the workplace, they're being abused at home, violence. And why do these things happen? There's causes for these. We have to focus on the cause. And I hope I responded to that, but I just want to get people to understand we have to focus on the cause of why things happen as much as we need to focus on how to stop it and what solutions would look like.
You bring us something really interesting, Donna, and sometimes we look at a person's actions without looking at what were the environmental circumstances that created, like, that influenced that person to make that decision. And what I'm also seeing, like, is that the reaction has been in such a way in which it, like, highlights the very thing that people are protesting, and what that means is that, like, I'm out here protesting police violence, but also faced with police violence in the course of that, and how hard and how difficult that is. We've seen the federal system react actually to the protests on the ground with actually a full lockdown in the entire federal system right now as we speak. Now, to pull the layer back, the federal system was already under modified lockdown because of COVID-19. Let's not forget that we're still in a pandemic, right? Let's not forget, that already exposed a whole nother layer of inequalities within our system. But right now, as we speak, the federal system responded with putting people literally in their cells and locking them down because of what's happening in the street. And I just want to get y'all to kind of like react a little bit to the connections between, like, the injustices in the street and how they are magnified inside. Like, we know about George Floyd because there was a camera, but it's really not no cameras inside of prison and other spaces where people are vulnerable. And what does that look like, And more importantly, when you have an entire group of people who don't feel heard, respected by the same folks who are supposed to protect them, and then find themselves inside of these carceral institutions as a result of this, right? Amy Cooper said, I'm going to call the cops on you and tell them there's an African-American who's here, etc. And of course, how many people have we met throughout our own incarceration who tell us that they're innocent? And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't believe everybody that said they were innocent. But I think that I heard it so many times that it made me question things long before I even knew the information that I know now. And now I know that I probably didn't believe a lot of folks who actually were innocent and not guilty, etc. But this idea that you can literally be put in there for something you didn't do, not because of what you did, but because of who you are. And that really changes the moral dynamics of our country and how we even look at guilt or even presumed innocence. So just kind of see if y'all can react to some of that, before we get to, I see some questions in the chat.
Now, Johnny, when you speak on violence, are you speaking on violence amongst incarcerated citizens or violence from correctional officers towards incarcerated citizens?
Yeah, I'll tell you this, I'll put it another way. I've been robbed so much by police that I've asked myself, why should I change anything? Or why should I not react the same way? Or why should I follow the law if, like, the cops are not following the law? Or you know what, better yet, I tried to follow the law and call the cops, but they shot my brother. And why should I call the cops now? And how these interactions actually damage the confidence between us, people in the community, and specifically people of color in the community and police, and police departments, et cetera, and how those interactions not only shape us, but then later on, impact us in ways in which we probably have yet to even like grasp the, to Don's point, like people are angry and fearful, but this is a buildup of years. I've had clients who say, Johnny, I tried to do everything right and nothing works. Like, what should I do now? So just these connections between what happens on the outside, specifically when encountering police and all these different forms of, like, I don't know, stop and frisk laws and all these different policies, and how, it really shapes and impacts folks while they're going through the system, and of course out.
Yeah. So going back to your original question, Johnny, about the parallels, and framed it perfectly, right? There are no cameras to witness what's happening behind the walls, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the likelihood of justice, even us being at a point where we're able to be outraged at the treatment, the inhumane treatment that we're exposed to in prisons,
Mm-hmm.
highly unlikely, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're forgotten. You make me think about experience with police brutality. Was at the age of 16, being incarcerated for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And as a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, when the officers came to pat search me, they touched me in a way that triggered me to the point where I lashed out, and it was my trauma, right? Going back to what Donna was saying, like, people don't think about the cause, right? Why is the child so angry?
Mm-hmm.
But as a means to defend myself, right? I lashed out because I was triggered. It was a subconscious process, right? And next thing you know, I'm getting beat down by 15 officers. And my first time in incarceration, I'm spending all of that time in the hole. Right? And the fact is, like, nobody, and sadly, like, the teachers didn't ask me why I'm upset and angry. No one really asked me. And the officers and the correctional officers were damn sure not gonna ask me, why I responded that way. They just saw me as everything that they had already determined I was as a Black man, which was an angry, right, volatile, less than human creature. And they beat me as such. And then they put me in a hole as such, because that's a part of the process too, right? They dehumanize us for responding to the trauma they imposed on us. And they see, I told you this is who they are.
How important is it to tell these stories, and not only to tell these stories, like we always talk about, it's really important to share these stories, but really emphasizing how important is it to encourage people to tell those stories, and and to really feel empowered to be able to come out and say, hey, you know what, like, this happened to me, that happened to me. In the course of my work, even in the nonprofit world, I've met too many Black women actually who have felt oppressed by their very own, like the same folks that they work for and with, but not feeling like, hey, like, I can't say nothing because of fear of losing my job and things like that. So, like, and which is like why I think it's a great time for people to really do some internal checking and maybe do some internal surveys about the folks you're working with anonymously. But like, what is the role of stories? What is the role of storytelling during this moment, right? And like this moment in history, and then how important is it to believe these stories? And again, going back to Amy Cooper, how, like, I can't imagine being this brother who's just like in Central Park bird watching. I tell you to put a collar on your dog, and you like get so angry that you're willing to call the cops on me. And check this out, I had another layer, why it triggered me, because I've been on parole. And I've had people say, I'm gonna call the cops on you and tell them, hold on. Okay, I'm gonna call the cops on you and tell them that you are on parole, and they're gonna believe me and not believe you because you have a criminal record. And how do I balance that? How do I protect myself? So the importance of storytelling, but more importantly, the importance of believing the stories that people tell. How do we balance the truth from the Amy Coopers of the world?
Can you hear me, Johnny?
Yes, I can. Yeah.
I learned a long time ago, and I still, I believe this notion that you can quote a bunch of statistics about a young lady being raped, but if you tell a story about it, it's more grabbing, it's more powerful. So I think even if you go down to history, you go down to the Bible, all these religious books is always a parable in it. It's a parable that represent a value or principle, and it's always it's impactful. So I think stories are very impactful. Stories are very important, and I think you just have to, like, for me, I have never been a open person. I was always kind of antisocial, and solitary confinement just emphasized that. So even till this day, I'm not the type of person that can work the room as well as others. I have to sit back in the corner and kind of watch the room and ease myself into the situation. So for me being now and being able to tell certain stories, and Richard, you kind of reminded me of something. I was what they deem a juvenile delinquent, and I was in and out of juvenile facilities, and I can't remember one juvenile facility that I didn't get slammed on my neck or, beat up by the staff that worked there. And I was never, an extra go hard type of person, but I spoke my mind. And sometimes you just speaking your mind and showing somebody in a authoritative position that you're not afraid of them, or you're willing to fight for your rights, or you're willing to stand for your rights, or you're willing to just speak out. Sometimes that can put you in a position where you can get beat up. And I think those stories are important because sometimes we normalize things, so we don't think that it's trauma. We don't think that those stories are important. There's a lot of stories that I may tell you and you'll look at it like, wow, you went through that. And for me, it was just every day. I'm like, yeah. So I think the first step would be for a lot of us that have been incarcerated, to assess and see, are we normalizing, the trauma that we went through? And if we are, is that enabling us to speak about it?
Yeah, Johnny, can I jump in there on that question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I appreciate what everybody's saying, man. And Richard and Marcus, Donna, thank you for sharing your personal stories already within the past half an hour that we've been on here. And in the spirit of storytelling, first of all, I just want to say that storytelling for people who experienced it is not always easy. Right? I can speak for myself. First of all, it's not always easy to constantly dig into my trauma to tell you a story about me, because a lot of times it could just be very salacious, right? A lot of times it could just be, wow, that's what you went through, and there's no action after that. From the people, right? I think that another important thing is that I saw a tweet yesterday, and the tweet said, privilege is reading about what we've experienced, right? And so that's privilege, that you read about these issues and we've experienced it. However, it's the people that are constantly reading about the issues leading everything, right? And I'm not saying that there's no space there for people who have studied, educated, that have a sense of privilege. There is a space there, but I think that we are not given a space on the same level. And so we have been devalued just to our stories, not our leadership. And that has been hurting the movement drastically. There are celebrities with millions and billions of followers who are getting, they're getting canceled constantly. You say, oh, this person said one tweet. That's because they're not coming from a place of education. All right, we live this. We're what I'm calling hashtag essential advocates, right? We lived it, right? And so we didn't have the privilege of reading it. And I think that we're constantly being devalued just and minimized only to our story. So I want to start with that. The second part, I want to talk about the importance of story. Yes, it is important. When we talk about defunding the police, defunding prisons, I think general public doesn't really grasp what that truly means, right? It's like, yeah, take money away from the police. First of all, yes, take money away from the police, yes. But defunding is more about reallocation. And mind you, first of all, where's this money coming from? I work, I pay taxes. So this is our money. This is our money that we're giving to you, the government, to provide public safety for us, to provide services for us. This is my money, right? So I want to talk about, as we story tell, and as we talk about defunding prison, defunding police, we're actually talking about reallocation. So take the $100 billion that goes to policing a year in the United States, additional $80 billion that goes into prisons in the United States. And I'm not even gonna get into this yet, but add an additional close to $700 million that goes into our military that we're seeing occupy these streets against civilians, right? That's close to $1 trillion that those three departments already get from our money. So when we talk about, again, defunding and reallocating, we're saying take that shit away from them and give it to mental health. Hire teachers and give them better wages. Give me a better education in a public school. Give me after school programs, arts, music, sports, whatever, right? Give healthcare for all. Why are people still paying for insulin, right? And more, right? Like everyone should deserve healthcare. Mental health, house the unhoused. People keep complaining about homeless people, right? Feed them, right, Donna, right? Like feed them. $700 trillion and people are hungry in this country, and I'm giving you the money to do that? So that's my point. Where our stories, like where have the system has failed us and continues to fail us. They failed us when we were out in the streets. I told y'all, the parentless, homeless, high school dropout by the age of 17. You know when the police came? When I committed a crime. That's when the police came. The police came way later. And they didn't provide public safety. Police come after a crime has been committed. People don't understand that. A lot of police keep our community safe. No, they don't. They come after. People call them when something happens, right? So before I get too fired up, man, I'm gonna stop. I'm gonna pause right there. Yeah, and I think that's how we can mobilize and organize. Like, now we need to we need to be the leaders. And as we defund through our stories and say, look, this is how education system failed me. I ended up in prison because of school to prison pipeline, or the healthcare. I had died, whatever your story is. That's the power of story, but tied to the value of our leadership with it, not just salacious storytelling.
Yeah, as you were talking, and that's heavy. Before the next person jumps in, like this balance between sympathy and empathy, right? Like how sometimes like I don't want you to feel bad about, my experience. I want you to put yourself in my shoes and feel what I felt at the time, and hope that mobilizes you in such a way in which really enables you to act and act in such a way which still honors my experience, but also prevents others from experiencing the same. Hence, dismantling of this system, the reinvestment piece that you're talking about, things like that. Richard?
Yeah, man. Brother, I'm so glad you brought that perspective, because that's where we're at, right? The fact is, we've been telling our stories forever. Like the stories about our lives being taken in the street. We don't even have to have stories anymore. We have video. We have footage of it. Like there's like numerous accounts of like the ways that we've been attacked and the ways that we've been harmed and our communities have been terrorized and we've been murdered, right? To no avail, right?
Yeah.
At this point, you're absolutely right. We need to talk about building power, right? Because the fact is, America did not become the most powerful country on the planet because of its benevolence, because of its charity, but because of its violence, because it's strategizing, right? That's the reason why they're investing the money that they're investing in the military industrial complex, because they know they need to keep a reservoir, right? The United States has over 4,000 nuclear warheads. So it only takes 100 nuclear warheads to cause what they call mutually assured destruction. Why do we have 3,900 more nuclear warheads that we've invested trillions of the taxpayers' dollars in, right? Because we want to be the baddest person on the block. No different than the way we try to demonize and stigmatize and criminalize our young brothers and sisters out in the community who come in the same vein, because that is just a microcosm of the macrocosm. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. We could tell our story till we're blue in the face in hopes that it would touch on the heartstrings of people. And I think that's what the big difference is right now, because people are starting to see the power of folks coming together and organizing and strategizing and really engaged in direct action, and the fearlessness, because a big part of the way that they've been able to control us is through the usage of fear. And the way that they invoke that fear is through violence. And now our young people, our people out there are not scared to lose their lives. And I think this is really the pivotal point in the shift in the power and them recognizing our humanity and seeing us. And sadly, to Donna's point, I wish it didn't have to take violence, but like, how long are we going to continue to tell our stories in hopes that people will hear it and feel that sympathy or even that empathy? I tell my stories only for the sake of supporting the healing of other people who share my experiences, so that they know that they're not alone and that I can relate to them. I don't share my stories for the sake of changing somebody's heart, because the knowledge is out there, the information is out there, and people have not been listening.
That's deep. I like what you said. Actually, I have to reflect on what you said about like not necessarily sharing your story to change people's hearts. You know, I'm gonna react to a few things. So, you know, Sister Dominica Bianco, and sorry if I mispronounced your name, you know, but she talks about this boldness of how you can actually see the police officer actually engaging in behavior. It's like, wow, we never thought we'd see a police officer do that, but to actually see it, it kind of hit us in a different way, you know. And kind of react and with that in mind, right? About, okay, now what do we do to change, and kind of shifting the solutions here. You know, there's a question in the chat by Marley Brinton, who said, you know, who do you get into power who is race neutral? Our leaders want votes. They don't really care about people of color or even white people. Votes, power. Votes, power, who do you trust, who is neutral, how do you vote? And that's, unquote, her question. So if can folks react to that question? Any thoughts around it? Donna, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot, pushing our people to vote and trying to get our people out there. Right now, just for right now, we don't have too many choices. We can't really change the choices right now in this moment of who we have. We know we have to get 45 out, right? We're more than likely it's going to be Biden, right? Am I in favor of Biden? Absolutely not. One of the authors of the crime bill, which really affected us strongly in prison and in the most marginalized communities in this country. It still does. It's the reverberating effects of that. But I'm doing my best to encourage those of us who look like us, who've experienced like us, who talk like us, who eat like us, who walk like us, who breathe like us, right? To run for some kind of office. We need to start putting ourselves in these spaces. We need to start voting ourselves in. And we can do this. We see this now. We have a sister, Shaniqua Charles, who's running for city council at this moment. Shout out to Shaniqua, right? Those are people, she's lived this. She has this experience, but she gets it, she understands it. We will never ever know, understand this. We will never really know what's in the heart of a human being. We will really never know. Some of us have had to, that's my best friend, that's my buddy. They will go down for me or whatever. And then we find out, I know I've been living it a lot in this work, being a leader, especially, that they have not been the friend that we thought they were. But this is the prices that we pay when we live in this world. These are experiences that we're going to go through. We're going to still go through some bumps. We're going to still go through some rocky climbs here. But the thing is, we got to start thinking differently and doing things differently. We don't need to continue seeing, what's his name? What's his name? The white dude that was running for president. I just lost his thing. White guy, billionaire. We don't need to keep seeing those people running.
Tom Steyer?
Thank you. I forgot his name that quickly.
Yeah.
They don't get it. We need people that really have lived this experience, and not just incarceration, but understand what it's like to go to bed and know when you wake up, the only thing you're going to have is a slice of bread and some carnation milk to act as the, you know what I mean? That in between, right? The little filler, right? To get to your child, eat some sardines. My country ate sardines a lot, right? So we need to understand this and start working on that right now. We should have been doing it yesterday, but we can't look back. We got to continue to look forward. So let's focus on who we can get in now to start priming them up to, like, hey, vote. Get them in to run. We need to start doing that now.
So you brought up an important point, like, you know, like for NRCAT, we truly like support the idea, like, you have to vote. You know, if folks take anything away, is to vote. Of course, decide who you want to vote for, and we are a nonpartisan organization. However, we do tell folks to vote and to exercise that right, not to forget that right, and try to empower those who've been disenfranchised to vote, to actually vote, and the power, and the thinking is that, when we don't actively engage in electing our civic leaders, or even run for office in some cases, right, then we allow, and this goes for like any community, like we allow, other folks to set the rules, boundaries, guidelines, and even look like everything with our own communities. I'm a big fan of having to say so about what goes on in my community. And it wasn't until I was released where I was actually able to like civically engage and really think about it. Donna, someone wants you to run for office. Norma J. F. Harrison wants you to run for office and use the electoral podium as well as the streets. Indeed, I want to talk about like as far as going from here, right? Like what are some specific, and Adnan, you were going into it, right? About, defund the police, but reinvest it back into the community, and that seems like a viable solution. Like, hey, if you're spending billions of dollars here, guess what? You can use that same money and be more effective here. And that's even prevent those kind of situations here, So just trying to get your thinking in other areas about some different policy changes.
Well, Johnny, I think that's a connection with Donna just said, right? Because it's like we know, hey, we need to divest or defund and put it here, right? Here's all the solutions. A bunch of us are out here in the community, right? I was on the phone with Donna yesterday, and she was delivering food for people that were hungry on our call, right? Like in the moment. So my point is, like, we know we're doing it, we're underfunded, right? But the problem is the people who have the power to allocate or reallocate the money are not doing it, right? Cuomo, Bill de Blasio, Eric Garcetti here in LA, like they're not doing it. So and what they're doing now, what I'm noticing, I want all of us to be very mindful of this movement, right? Because how I'm seeing, at least from the leaders, I'm seeing a lot of pacifiers being handed out. In LA, a $3 billion budget for police. Yesterday, the mayor comes on and says this large number, and these numbers are crazy, right? Like 100 to 150 million were taken away from the police. Okay, 150 million sounds like a large number, but you know what percentage that is compared to 3 billion? That's like a crumb. That's nothing. So that clearly tells me that's a pacifier. You're trying to pacify us with this and keep your position, and everyone's telling you to resign. Everyone's telling the police chief to resign. They refuse to do so. So again, it goes back to who are in these positions, which goes back to what Donna said. Impacted people or people who get it need to start running for these positions. We need to start being in these positions so we have the power to reallocate the money. We know what to do. We just don't have the power to do so. That is the problem. No governor, no mayor, no city council member is stepping up right now. None of them are being brave enough to step to the police department or the police chief. No one's doing it. And I think it has a lot to do with they misunderstand what community policing means. They misunderstand what abolishing the police means because they don't realize that, that when, for example, when people are sleeping on the park bench, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Most people just call the police. And the police, how they deal with someone that's sleeping on the park bench will not be the same as if we had a number to call somebody that houses people that's funded. Mm-hmm. So they think, oh no, if we don't, police is the only one we can call if someone's sleeping there. What about someone that's behaving erratically, right? Mm-hmm. Someone that has a mental, has mental health struggles. When you call the police, they're gonna draw their guns on this individual and shoot that person, most likely. But what if there was a number where people can call, where mental health experts respond within the next 5 minutes? Mm-hmm. That we fund that. We don't need the police in that situation. So my point is that the people here that are in this position that refuse to resign, that refuse to defund, that refuse to do all this, one, they're not educated because they don't understand it. All they think of is in the box of policing, right? Yeah. And the people like us who get it, people like us who lived it, people like us who lived the solutions, right? Mm-hmm. In the streets, doing it for free, are the ones who aren't in these positions. That's the problem. So I'm with Donna. We need to run. We need to get funded. Right? People are talking about blowing up Target. Target got, well, what Target? Do you fund Trump? Why don't you fund my campaign? Why don't you fund Donna's campaign, Target?
Yeah.
What about that? Did you know WWE, all this stuff, you know, that thing would be trending on WWE, WrestleMania, whatever, trends on social media, right?
Yep.
But they fund Trump. But they're not going to fund Donna. They're not going to fund Johnny or Richard or Marcus.
Yeah. So let me jump in there real quick. There's a really great question that came in actually from an anonymous attendee, and I'll read it verbatim. Quote, to touch on systemic racism, race and ethnicity is a question within the census, which is supposed to be a tool to appropriately distribute funding and representation. What are your thoughts about eliminating race from these questionnaires that really don't need race to send funding or representation to communities? Do you think that having race and ethnicity on forms is needed to preserve our identity and culture, or that it is not? Any reactions to that question? The idea of adding race and ethnicity to questionnaires that later on are used to appropriate and distribute funding across different communities.
Johnny, they're asking, do we need to do away with that?
Yeah, so like, do you think that having race and ethnicity on forms is needed to preserve our identity and culture, or is it not?
I think it's needed for us to gain access to the resources that we need, that we've been denied access to, right? Because even if folks want to come and say that race is a socially constructed idea, that it's not real, and some people believe that, and I understand that as a sociologist, right? I understand that completely. The fact is, race has been like paramount to the social realities and lived experiences of Black and brown people. So yes, we are entitled to access resources, and sometimes in the spirit of equity and not equality, in the spirit of equity, and access more resources than others because we've been deprived for so long. I wanted to touch on one really quick thing, right?
We have 5 minutes. We have a hard stop at 5, but yeah, go ahead.
I got you. Wait. So one of the things I'm saying about voting, many of the young people who are out there right now who are tearing up stuff are the same people who lost hope in our voting, in our democracy, in our system. These are people who wanted Elizabeth Warren, who wanted Bernie Sanders, who wanted someone who was going to come with a more progressive agenda, who found themselves once again being duped. Votes don't even count because now we're stuck in the same predicament where we have to choose the lesser of two evils, right? And so those people are like at their wits' end, and they're like, I don't care. And that's the beautiful thing about our young people, the idealism, right? Because sometimes those of us, when we get older, we kind of get stuck in the rut of believing like, you know, this is just the way that things are, and we just have to make the most practical decision. But they're here to teach us to think creatively, to think beyond our wildest dreams, right? To think about the free and liberated world that we all desire in ways that sometimes we have lost the courage to do.
I have one last question to close us out, you know, and folks are, you know, giving thanks and things like that. You know, I appreciate Mariposa. She works on solitary out in California where you're at, Adnan. You know, is two quick things that I want you to each touch on as we close out. You know, how do we heal from here? Not where do we go from here, but how do we heal, right? And that's less of a policy decision than it is more of an internal thing, right? To just get your thoughts on that, right? And then if you think that, and then if you had one ask, right, you know, like in this moment, specifically through the lens of your experience, the work that you do, you know, and like, what is that one thing specifically faith leaders and congregations and people of different faith communities can do right now in this moment to support your work, and to support, either to support you, to support your work, and so I'm not being so intentional about that question, but what can folks do to get involved with your work, and how can folks support it? And how do we heal from here? HEAL, heal from here. And I know it might be too early to ask that question. I think I posted something on Facebook and people were like, well, how do we, and I know there's still a lot of anger things. It might not even have time right now to talk about healing, but if we're able to think through the future and a little bit more, it's like, okay, how do we heal from this moment? But more importantly, and also how can folks support you and your movement, things like that. And I gave you I gave you a 5-minute response, and like you had like 2-3 minutes, but if we can keep it to a minute, and then for folks online, we want to encourage you to connect with us directly. We'll connect you to these folks directly. If you don't already connect with them directly, then I'm going to ask the panelists to drop their emails and things like that in the chat so people can talk to you directly. They don't have to go through NRCAT to talk to you, but so drop your information and give that quick response, and then we'll shut it down and respect people's time. And like, I love y'all so much. I wish I can hug each and every one of you. Anyone can start.
I'll say really quickly. Thank you, Johnny. Thank you for bringing this together. Thank you for giving us this moment to come together during these crazy times. I'm not hiding. I'm transparent. I'm not hiding from anybody. So you can find me in most all social media sites. My name is Donna Hylton, DonnaHylton. I'm out there. I have an organization, of course, called A Little Piece of Light. You will find us online. We are www.alittlepieceoflight.net. We have our website up. You can reach out at any time. You can send a message through social media. I encourage you to join me in this work because let's be clear, women don't get as much help as their men. And brothers, I always say this, but I have to be very, very clear. Women do not get as much attention, recognition, acknowledgement, and help and support like our men do. And it's great that they do, but we need you too. We have sisters to get out. We will not get to our end goal if we don't everybody's equally yoked here. Everyone.
Thank you so much for that, Donna. And I'll say that it's largely because of you that I do not do anything without involving, from the very beginning, women specifically who are directly impacted. Yes, you will never see a panel by me that does not include a woman who is equally and professionally adept to speak to the issue. So anyway, go ahead. Let's get out of here next.
Well, I support therapy.
Yeah.
I think a lot of, I grew up in a community that never promoted therapy. We looked at it, it's like a stigma against therapy in my community. I think we need to talk about it. We gotta let some of this pain out. You have to communicate what's going on inside of you, what you're feeling, how you're seeing things. And you gotta allow yourself to process certain emotions. We like to bottle things up, and especially men, I think we're not taught to be emotional, to be open. We're kind of conditioned to be guarded. It's unmanly in a sense. So I just think basically at a basic point, just communicate with each other and, tell your son what you feel, how you feeling about police brutality really. And, let the rage out though, but do it in a way where it's a constructive conversation, but let your son know that you're hurt. I'm hurt, don't just hide it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we hide too much stuff. So I think 2 ways you can help me out. I'm a part of a organization that's called Project Pen. We deal with gang mediation and mentoring and victim awareness. So we need volunteers. We need everything because we're at the beginning stages of trying to. A lot of us are coming home now. We started it inside, and we was effective and successful inside. So we're trying to get it rolling out here. So if you have a passion for mediation, you want to work with at-risk youth, you want to try to change the perspective of some of these younger guys in the community and younger women, please email me. And the second one would be the Second Chance College program with the University of Baltimore. Right now we have at least 5 students that are that just recently came home and are attending college, is getting credits, and we have at least 50 something more inside that's also in college. We need books, we need everything. We need everything. So any type of help, any assistance is much needed and respected. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Appreciate that. And we have Richard and Adnan.
I'll be brief. Yeah, I just want to, being time sensitive, you talked about healing, man. That is a big question, Johnny. I think you know, healing for me, there's like two parts, right? There's like the correcting a wrong, or more so like alleviating grief, alleviating stress, and that's emotional. That could be mental, and that could be physical, right? Like physical pain. We're seeing police shooting at us, or all sorts of equipment right now, right? So there's layers of dimensions of healing. It's sad that we need to heal our mental, our physical, and our emotional, and our spiritual all at the same time, and then heal the system. And so that's where I think for me, I'm not.
Can you say that again? Can you say that one last? I'm sorry.
I don't think I can. I honestly don't think I can.
Should have caught it. Okay, you're right.
It's recorded, right? All right. So you got to just play that one back, man. That just came from the heart. I don't even know what I just said.
I love that.
No, but I think it was in the spirit of like healing is different dimensions. You know, heart, mind, soul. But also we're fighting against the system too, healing, you know, from the system, because it's going to continue to abuse all those dimensions that's within us. And so for me, I'm not sure, you know, I think I can band-aid things as I go along and know that the system is going to rip off my band-aid in the fight, you know, but I can keep on like bandaging myself and keep moving until the system is defeated. And then we can the healing, you know, because I don't know, I could say all that. As far as helping me, you know, I'm trying to rush past this, so my bad, man. I don't want to take up too much time. As far as helping me, I would punt that to everyone. Help me by helping yourself, educate yourself, like in your local government, in your council, your city council, your people who are the leaders, who are the impacted people, who you think can run city, state, federal, whatever. Like we need to take control, and we need to get into these doors and start changing the system from the legal way that this. Even though I don't agree with the way it's all set up, I think that's one of the paths. So by helping me, not so much helping me directly, but just help yourself in educating the system and how to get and run for office or elected seats in your district, in your county, in your state.
Thank you so much for that, Adnan. Richard.
One thing I've been saying is that trauma distills down into powerlessness. So what's happening right now in the streets is a form of healing. People get into organizing direct action as a form of healing to take back the power that's been stripped by them from them by the system. But we also have to simultaneously work on, like Adnan said, healing inside of ourselves too, because we have been impacted by these same systems where the trauma still lives in our body, which is the reason why a more politicized form of healing needs to take place, which folks call healing justice. Not just the individual healing, but we also have to like work on healing in ways that causes this system to change so it doesn't perpetuate the harm. And so I think that's also critical to earlier points about when we find those who've been impacted may impose the same type of harm on our own people because we're not healing internally. So we got to do both at the same time. We got to heal. We got to heal from this system and change this system while simultaneously healing ourselves. So we as the oppressed don't become the oppressors of our own.
Thank you, each and every one of you, for making time to share space with us today. I know it's hard times. You know, I have we're all coming from all over, and for people, I see we started off with 117 people, and here we are. We still have 96 people. So all of you, thank you for staying on with us. And you can definitely see a number of different, just like these conversations, the rest of the month, we'll be sending emails about that. But thanks again. Peace, be well, and love each other. Thanks.
Peace.